In the heart of Montana's untamed wilderness, where autumn brushes every peak of Glacier National Park in gold, rust, and flame, a man walked with memories instead of footsteps. His name was Matthew Harrison, a seasoned wildlife photographer, 42 years old. Years of chasing moments had worn him down. But one final shot, just one, might bring back the fire in his soul. He waited by a quiet creek. Camera steady, breath still. And there it was, a tiny bobcat kitten, trembling, frail, and utterly alone. His lens captured its struggle, its silence, its fragile breath against the wind. But then Matthew felt something behind him. Not fear, not cold, something softer, a gentle touch on his back. He turned slowly and found himself face to face with her. The mother bobcat, her amber eyes met his, not wild with rage, not burning with fear, but calm, intense, pleading. She did not run. She did not growl. She only stared as if saying, "Follow me. There is something you need to see." What could make such a solitary hunter break the ancient boundary between wild and human? What grief or terror waited deeper in the trees? This is a story of instinct surrendered to trust, of compassion where survival once ruled, and of a man who learned that sometimes the most powerful images are the ones we never show to the world. The alarm shattered the silence at 4:30 a.m. But Matthew Harrison was already awake, staring at the wooden ceiling of his rented cabin. Sleep had slipped through his grasp again, just as it often did these days. Even here, far from the relentless hum of Seattle, the quiet felt almost too deep, too still. A haunting echo of how far he had drifted from the world he once knew. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, reached for his glasses. At 42, Matthew had spent nearly 2 decades behind the lens. His photographs had graced National Geographic, wildlife conservation, and countless others. But lately, even his best shots felt hollow. Technically flawless, but empty of soul. "Just get through this assignment," he whispered, fingers brushing through graying strands of hair. "Maybe then you will find whatever it is you are looking for." The cabin was modest but comforting. A single bedroom, a small bath, a cozy kitchen living space where wide windows opened into wilderness. And outside, dawn had begun to unfurl across the sky. Soft ribbons of pink and gold washing over the jagged silhouettes of Glacier National Park. The land breathed quietly beneath it. He had arrived 3 days ago. Despite the firm, worried voice of his ex-wife, Karen, and the pleading eyes of their daughter, Emma. "Dad, Montana, in October. The weather's unpredictable and you will be all alone," she had said on their last video call. Emma, now 19, studying environmental science at the University of Washington, walking her own path, but somehow still following his footsteps. "I will be fine," Emmy had assured her. But the ache in his chest told another story. Since the divorce 5 years ago, he and Emma had remained close. But something between them had shifted. Now everything felt like a careful balance. 2 separate worlds bridged by moments like these. After a quick breakfast, instant coffee, and a protein bar, Matthew packed his gear with quiet precision. His trusted Canon EOS R5. A 100 to 400 mm lens for distant detail. A smaller camera for broader frames. Extra batteries, filters, memory cards, a collapsible tripod, trail mix, jerky, water, a first aid kit, and a satellite phone. A silent nod to Emma's concern. He zipped his weatherproof pack shut, stepped outside into the brittle morning air, and breathed deep into his lungs. The cold sharpened everything, his senses, his steps, his resolve. The trail had began just beyond the cabin, a 4-mile stretch leading toward the eastern edge of the park. Nestled in a narrow valley that wildlife often used as passage. According to his research, bobcats lived here, quiet, elusive, especially mothers with kittens. If he could capture even one image in their natural rhythm, it would become the heart of his new project, North America's Wild Cats. His editor had hesitated. "Bobcats are ghosts, Matt. Are you sure you do not want something easier?" But Matthew had insisted. Something about them called to him. Their solitude, their resilience, their silent strength. They were a challenge. A mirror perhaps of something inside himself. A way to prove that he still had what it took to capture something. Truly unforgettable. Soon Matthew veered off the main trail onto a faint game path barely visible beneath the blanket of fallen leaves and tangled undergrowth. Each step was deliberate, slow, carefully placed to blend with the quiet. This was not a walk. It was a ritual. Wildlife photography had taught him this. Patience above all else. The willingness to wait, to listen, to become part of the silence. Hours, sometimes days, all for one fleeting, perfect second. By mid-morning, he reached a familiar clearing near a narrow creek. Here, days ago, he had seen the whisper of bobcat tracks in the soft mud. He unfolded his blind. A small camouflage tent barely noticeable to the untrained eye. Inside, his camera lens extended through a slit in the fabric, and then he waited. The forest lived and breathed around him. Chicks danced between the branches above. A squirrel scolded the world from a mossy log, and somewhere deeper, the rhythmic knock of a woodpecker pulsed through the trees. Matthew raised the camera now and then, snapping idle frames, more to keep himself sharp than to capture anything real, but mostly he drifted. His mind wandered to the ghosts of old expeditions, to the ache of things unsaid, and to the silence his future seemed to hold. The divorce had been calm, polite even, but it had left behind a quiet unraveling. Karen had grown weary of the waiting, of the absences, the long weeks where he disappeared into wild places, chasing light and shadow. "I feel like I am married to your camera," she had said once. Not bitter, just tired. And that is not enough anymore. He could not argue. He had missed too much. Birthdays, anniversaries, parent-teacher meetings, all traded for shots that hung in gallery halls or filled glossy pages. Now, as middle-aged pressed gently on his shoulders, he wondered, had it been worth it? Colleagues praised his eye for detail, his skill with light and framing. But when had he last felt something real through the lens? When had the wild stopped being a wonder and become just another deadline? A flicker of motion tugged him back to the present. His body stiffened, finger poised over the shutter, eyes narrowing. There, a blur of tawny fur at the edge of the clearing. He held his breath and waited slowly, carefully. A small form stepped from the underbrush. A bobcat kitten barely a few months old. Its coat dappled and speckled melted into the forest floor like living camouflage. Tufted ears twitched. Alert scanning. But something was wrong. Its steps were uneven. Shaky. It stumbled more than once as it approached the creek. Matthew's heart began to race. His camera clicked in rapid succession. Frame after frame. This was it. The kind of moment photographers chase for a lifetime. Raw, intimate, unrepeatable. But as he adjusted his focus, excitement slipped into unease. The kitten looked thin. Its fur lacked the healthy sheen of youth. And then it reached the water's edge and call. Breathing fast, Matthew hesitated. His training screamed one thing. Do not interfere. Nature must be left to itself. But his heart felt another pull entirely. There was something about that tiny creature, so fragile, so utterly alone. He lowered the camera almost without realizing and slowly emerged from his blind. Every movement careful, measured, he expected it to flee, to vanish like smoke into the trees, but it did not move. Only the rapid rise and fall of its delicate ribs told him. It was still fighting to breathe. "Hey there, little one," Matthew whispered, his voice barely more than breath. As he knelt a few feet away from the trembling creature, the kitten lay still, too weak to run, too far gone to care. He raised the camera again, snapped a few frames, not for beauty, but to remember. Up close, he could see the truth in the kitten's dull eyes. Severe dehydration may be worse. Where was the mother? Bobcat kittens do not survive alone. Not at this age. They remain with their mothers nearly a full year, learning to stalk, to hide, to live. Matthew gently set the camera down and reached for his water bottle. His fingers paused midair. How do you help a wild thing? Without hurting it more. That was when he felt it. A touch soft, so delicate it could have been a breeze, but it was not. He froze, every muscle in his body stiff with instinct. Slowly, with the weight of fear crawling up his spine, he turned his head and found himself eye to eye. With her, the mother bobcat, full-grown, beautiful, and terrifying in her power. Her amber eyes did not rage. They did not burn. They pleaded. She was close. Too close, but not poised to strike, not crouched to defend. She looked at him, then at the kitten, then back again, and lifted one paw, placing it gently on his arm. Time unraveled in that instant. All the rules of the wild seemed to fall away. He could feel the desperation in her gaze. Not as an animal, but as a mother. "This cannot be real," he whispered. His camera sat behind him now, out of reach. And for once he did not care again. The bobcat touched him more firmly this time, then turned. She stepped toward the dense thicket beyond the clearing, pausing, looking back at him. Matthew glanced at the kitten, still unmoving, still breathing. Then he made a choice, one that defied every rule he had followed his entire life. He stood slowly, so as not to startle her, and followed deeper into the woods. One step at a time, the underbrush thickening with every turn. The bobcat moved with purpose, glancing back to be sure he was still there, leading him somewhere only she understood. His heart thundered. Every sound sharpened by adrenaline. Every branch snap a reminder. This was madness. Following a wild predator into the unknown. But still he followed because something in her steps. Something in her sorrow felt too deliberate, too human. After nearly 10 minutes winding through brambles and shadow, she stopped beside a fallen log. Matthew heard it before he saw it. A broken aching cry, his chest clenched. And then he saw another kitten caught in the steel jaws of a spring trap. "Oh God," he breathed, his stomach turning with sickening clarity. She had not been warning him. She had been asking for help because she could not free her child on her own. The trapped kitten writhed in pain, its leg crushed. The mother moved to its side, licked its face gently, soothing what she could not fix. And then she looked up at Matthew. And in her eyes, he saw something that shattered him. He saw grief. He saw hope. And for just a moment, he swore he saw tears. "I am going to help," he whispered softly. She could not understand his words. But maybe, just maybe, she could understand his tone. "I do not want to hurt either of you, but you need to give me space." And to his disbelief, she backed away a few slow steps, then sat down on her hunches, watching, trusting him with the life of her child. Matthew stepped closer to the trap. Each movement careful, measured, the air felt heavier here, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. The device was old, crude, a rusted leg-hold trap, its steel jaws stained dark with time and blood. He recognized it instantly. This was not legal. Not here. Not without permits and oversight. He knelt beside the injured kitten. Its small body trembled in pain and fear. It hissed softly, a sound more desperate than threatening, but it did not scratch, did not bite. As if it knew. "Easy, little one," Matthew murmured, reaching slowly into his pack, fingers finding the familiar weight of his multi-tool. "This is going to be okay." He had never disarmed a trap before, but the mechanism was brutally simple. 2 jaws, a spring pressure. Using the pliers, he found the tension point. His hands strained against the resistance, muscles quivering, arms shaking with effort. The spring groaned, then gave. The jaws loosened just enough for him to slip the kitten's leg free. The moment it was released, the kitten tried to scramble, but collapsed almost instantly. Too weak to flee, too hurt to rise, the mother stepped forward. Silent, careful, she sniffed her child, then began licking the blood from its injured leg. Slow, tender, as if her touch alone could mend it. Matthew backed away a few paces, letting them have their moment. He opened his canteen, poured clean water into the cap, and set it gently on the ground beside them. "It is clean," he said softly. "It might help." To his surprise, the mother bobcat stepped toward it, sniffed once, then drank briefly, then nudged her injured kitten closer. The little one drank too. Shaky sips between shallow breaths. Matthew rummaged again in his pack, pulled out the compact first aid kit. Not made for wildlife, but it held something. Antiseptic wipes. "This might sting," he warned quietly, extending his hand toward the wound. The mother did not move, only watched, her amber eyes unblinking as he dabbed the swollen leg. The kitten whimpered, but stayed still, maybe too tired to resist, maybe trusting him just enough. When he was done, Matthew sat back, watching the family, watching the pain, the resilience, the strange, fragile peace that now rested in the clearing. The injury was bad, but not fatal. If infection stayed away, if the mother continued to care, there was hope. But there was still the other kitten alone by the creek. As if hearing his thoughts, the mother rose. Turned, and without hesitation, trotted back the way they had come. Matthew followed again. At a respectful distance, back through the trail of broken leaves and memory, until they reached the quiet bend of the creek once more. The first kitten still lay where he had left it, curled on the moss, barely breathing. The reunion broke something in him. The mother moved to her side, nudged her gently, encouraging her to rise, but she could barely lift her head. Matthew knelt again, this time pulling out a small packet of jerky. He tore it into tiny pieces and tossed them near the bobcats. "It is not ideal," he whispered, "but it is protein. Might help until you can hunt again." The mother sniffed the offering, then ate one piece. Then, after a pause, she picked up another with her teeth and placed it gently in front of her weakened kitten. The little one chewed slowly, but it ate. And for nearly an hour, Matthew sat there, still, silent, just watching. He could not help himself. He took a few photos. Not for glory, not for a magazine, but because this was real and rare and unbearably beautiful. As the day began to dim, the golden light turning soft and low, he knew he had to leave. The forest trail would be treacherous in darkness. He rose slowly, reluctantly. "I have to go," he said gently, his voice catching in his throat. And for a moment, he felt as though they might actually understand him. "I will come back tomorrow," Matthew said softly, his voice filled with quiet promise. "I will bring more food, something better for the kittens." The mother bobcat did not move, but she watched him, her amber eyes tracing each motion, each step as he gathered his things. Before he left, he placed the last of his jerky on a patch of flat rock, poured clean water into the cap once more, then turned back toward the forest trail. The hike home was a blur. His body moved out of habit, but his mind was still in the clearing, still locked in the amber gaze of a mother who had asked for help. Had it really happened? Had a wild bobcat broken every instinct to ask a human for aid? It defied everything he thought he knew about wildlife, about boundaries, about what it meant to observe without interfering. That night, Matthew sat at the cabin's small kitchen table, his laptop glowing softly in the dark. He reviewed the images one by one, and what he saw took his breath away. These were not just photographs. They were moments intimate, raw, honest in a way his work had not been for years, but more than anything. There was something in her eyes, the mother bobcat. In those eyes lived a grief and a strength that transcended species. A kind of desperate love that any parent, human or animal, would understand. But as he stared at the screen, a shadow crept in if he published these, revealed their location. What would happen? Would trappers return? Would well-meaning strangers flood the forest? Would the fragile rhythm of recovery be shattered? For the first time in his long career, Matthew questioned his role was documentation enough, or did he owe something deeper to the lives he captured through his lens? Sleep eluded him again that night, but not from emptiness, from awakening. By dawn, he had made his decision. He packed his gear with care. But this time, it was not for photos. He added high-quality cat food from the general store down the road, clean water, and a better first aid kit with antibacterial ointments safe for animals. The forest felt different now, more alive, more intimate. Every rustle, every chirp felt like part of a conversation he was only just beginning to understand. When he reached the creek, a part of him expected silence, an empty clearing, as if the previous day had been a dream. But they were there, huddled beneath a large spruce tree. The mother rose as he approached, alert, but calm. The injured kittens still limped, but both looked stronger. "I brought something better," Matthew whispered, unpacking the food, placing it gently on a flat stone. This should be easier on their stomachs than jerky. And so began something unexpected, a quiet, unspoken routine. Each morning, Matthew returned with food, with care, with presence. The mother grew used to him. Day by day, she allowed him closer until he could sit just feet away. As her kittens ate, the weaker one gained strength. The injured one's wound began to close, still favoring one leg, but curious, brave, often the first to step forward when Matthew arrived. The other kitten more cautious, ever near its mother, always watching. And Matthew. He took few photographs now. Instead, he simply watched. He listened, he learned. The way they moved, the way they spoke in silence, in touch, in posture, in patience. For once, the story was not for the world. It was for him. The kitten, the one with the injured leg, looked up at Matthew with solemn eyes, too wise for its young face, too knowing for something so small. Each evening, Matthew would call Emma. He never shared the full truth. Not yet, just fragments. "I am getting some great material," he would say, carefully editing out the wonder, the trust, the unexplainable. But Emma noticed as daughters often do. "You sound different, Dad," she said one night. "More. I do not know. Present like you are actually there, and not just chasing the next shot." Her words struck him like a quiet bell in his chest. She was right. Something had shifted. The endless hunger to capture, to prove, to chase had gone still. For the first time since he had first picked up a camera, he was not just documenting nature. He was experiencing it. On the morning of the 8th day, he returned to the clearing as he had each day before. But this time, something was different. The bobcat family was waiting for him, not hidden in the brush, not crouched in caution, but standing open at the very edge of the tree-in, as if they had been watching for him. Both kittens were on their feet now, the injured one still limping, but stronger, steadier. And then the mother stepped forward closer than she had ever dared before, within arm's reach, and sat, her amber eyes holding his. So much intelligence, so much calm. "You are leaving, are you not?" Matthew whispered. And somehow he knew. The kittens were well enough to travel now. And wild bobcats do not stay long in one place. It was time. The mother rose again, stepped close, and gently bumped her head against his arm. a gesture so strangely familiar, so soft that it made him laugh through the tears building in his eyes. And then she placed one paw on his knee, held his gaze as if to say thank you before turning and calling her family with both kittens beside her. She looked back one last time, a long silent goodbye. Then she vanished into the trees. Matthew stood there watching until the last flicker of spotted fur disappeared, and only the wind remained. His heart was full of something he could not quite name. Joy perhaps laced with grief, wonder tinged in silence, gratitude cradled in goodbye. That evening, back at the cabin, Matthew sat on the porch, his camera untouched beside him. The sky was on fire, brush strokes of orange, pink, and indigo bleeding into the mountains. There would be time for photographs later, other assignments, other wild things. But this was not for publishing, not for spreading, not for acclaim. This was something else. Something sacred, a quiet exchange between two species that had nothing to do with images and everything to do with trust. His phone rang. Emma's name lighting up the screen. "Hey, Em," he said, his voice warm. "Steady. Dad, are you okay?" She asked with a smile in her tone. "You have been weird all week." Matthew looked out across the darkening land, the hush of twilight settling gently around him. And he smiled. "I am better than okay," Matthew said softly, his eyes tracing the last gold edges of daylight slipping behind the forest. "I think I finally found what I was looking for." He paused, the silence filling with something warm. Emma waited on the other end, and Matthew closed his eyes. He thought of the mother bobcat's gaze. The moment her wild eyes had met his, not with fear, but with true. The way she had looked back one last time, and how in her silence she had said more than words ever could. It was a reminder, he said at last, a reminder of why I started doing this in the first place. It is not about the perfect shot. Them. It is about being part of something larger than yourself, even just for a moment. There was a pause, and then Emma's voice came back softer than before. "I am glad, Dad. Really glad. Will you tell me about it when you get back?" "Yeah," he said, smiling to himself. "But not just tell you. I want to show you. This summer. Maybe we could come back here together. There is so much I want you to see, really see, not just through photographs." As they spoke, making plans for a return, not just to a place, but to something shared. Matthew felt something, a shift in the air, a presence. He turned, and there she was, the mother bobcat, sitting calmly at the edge of the porch steps, bathed in the gathering darkness. "Nim, I have to go," he said quickly, his voice suddenly thick with emotion. "I will call you tomorrow." He ended the call, set the phone down slowly, and turned to face her, the wild creature who had changed something fundamental inside him. She was not alone. In the shadows behind her, two small shapes stood, the kittens, both strong now, silent and steady. "You came to say goodbye properly," Matthew whispered, his voice barely holding together. The mother blinked once slowly, that universal feline gesture of trust, of affection, and then without a sound she turned and vanished into the night, her children close behind, swallowed by the forest that had always been their home. Matthew remained seated on the porch long after the last rustle faded, long after the last paw step was gone. Tomorrow he would begin packing, preparing for the road back to Seattle, back to his other life. But this time he would not return the same man. He would carry back more than images, more than stories. He would carry back purpose, a deeper connection, a bond forged in silence and trust. And though most of what had happened would remain untold, unpublished, unseen by the world, it would guide his lens and his heart for the rest of his days. For now he simply sat alone with the stillness, honoring the wild and the sacred bond that had healed them both in ways either could have ever anticipated.